Jake Morrison pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of New Geneva Station. The wheels squeaked a little as they rolled over the metal floor. He had been walking these same halls for 8 years now, cleaning up after aliens from dozens of different worlds. Most people never noticed him. He was just the night janitor, the human who emptied their trash and mopped their floors while they slept. The station was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. It floated in space between 3 star systems, a place where different alien races came to talk business and make deals. Jake liked working the night shift because it was quiet then. During the day, the halls were full of important aliens in fancy clothes, speaking languages he did not understand. At night, it was just him and the hum of the air recycling systems. Jake was 45 years old and had worked on space stations most of his adult life. He was not tall or handsome or smart like the diplomats and traders who lived here. He had rough hands from years of manual work and gray hair that was starting to thin on top. But he was good at his job, and he minded his own business. That was enough to keep him employed and fed. Tonight felt different, though. As Jake cleaned the area near the Zephyrian embassy, he heard something that made him stop. It sounded like crying, but not human crying. It was a soft, musical sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and sad. Jake looked around. The Zephyrians were one of the most powerful alien races on the station. They looked like humans, but their skin was made of some kind of crystal that glowed with its own light. They were proud, and they did not talk to humans much unless they had to. Their embassy took up an entire floor of the station's best residential section. The crying sound came again. Jake followed it down a side corridor to a maintenance alcove where pipes and electrical conduits ran through the walls. There, sitting on the cold metal floor, was a young Zephyrian female. Jake had never seen a Zephyrian up close before. She was beautiful in an alien way, with skin that looked like it was made of pale blue crystal. But something was wrong. Instead of glowing brightly like other Zephyrians he had seen, her skin barely flickered with a dim light. She was thin, too thin, and her clothes were torn and dirty. She looked up when she heard Jake's footsteps. Her eyes were large and silver, filled with fear and exhaustion. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she spoke in broken Standard Galactic, the common language used throughout the space stations. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "do not tell them where I am." Jake set down his mop and crouched down to her level. He was not sure what was happening, but he could see that she was in trouble. "Who are you hiding from?" he asked gently. The young Zephyrian looked at him with surprise, as if she had not expected him to talk to her like a person instead of just calling security. "My own people," she said. "They have cast me out. I am no longer welcome among the Zephyrians." "Why?" Jake asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I questioned our ways. I spoke against how we treat other races. My family says I am tainted by alien ideas and that I bring shame to our name. They have declared me dead to them." Jake did not understand all the politics of alien races, but he understood being alone and afraid. "How long have you been hiding here?" he asked. 3 days, she said. "I have no food and nowhere to go. Other Zephyrians are forbidden to help me. If they find me, they will send me away from the station. I will die in the cold of space." Jake looked at this young alien who seemed so lost and scared. He thought about his small quarters in the human residential section. They were not much, just a bed, a small kitchen, and a place to sit, but they were warm and safe. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she said. "I am Jake," he said. "Lyra, you cannot stay here. Maintenance crews come through these areas during the day shift. You will be found." Her silver eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though Jake was not sure if Zephyrians could cry the way humans did. I know, she said. I am just trying to stay alive one more day. Jake made a decision that he knew might get him in trouble. Come with me, he said, standing up and offering her his hand. Lyra stared at his outstretched hand as if she had never seen anything like it before. You would help me? She asked. But I am nothing to you. I am not even human. Where I come from, Jake said, we do not leave people to die alone. It does not matter what planet they are from. Lyra took his hand and let him help her to her feet. She was taller than Jake, like most Zephyrians, but she moved slowly as if every step hurt. Jake could see that she was weak from hunger and exhaustion. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then guided her through the maintenance corridors toward the human section of the station. It was a longer route, but it kept them away from the main halls where security cameras might spot them. Why are you doing this? Lyra asked as they walked out. Jake thought about it for a moment. Because it is right, he said simply, and because no one should have to face the worst time of their life completely alone. When they reached Jake's quarters, he used his key card to open the door and quickly brought Lyra inside. His home was small and simple, with basic furniture and a few personal items from Earth. To Lyra, who had been sleeping on cold metal floors, it must have seemed like luxury. You can sleep on the couch, Jake said, pulling a blanket from his closet. It is not much, but it is warm and safe. Lyra sat down carefully on the couch, as if she was afraid it might break. Jake went to his small kitchen and heated up some soup. It was nothing fancy, just the kind of food that came in packages for station workers. But when he brought it to Lyra, she looked at the bowl as if he had given her something precious. I do not understand, she said. You risk your job, maybe worse, to help someone you do not know. This is not logical. Jake sat down across from her and smiled. Maybe not, he said, but it is human. As Lyra ate the soup, Jake watched her skin begin to glow just a little brighter. He realized that he had just done something that would change both of their lives forever. But looking at this young alien who had been thrown away by her own people, he knew he had made the right choice. Outside his small window, the stars continued to shine in the darkness of space. But inside his quarters, for the first time in days, Lyra was safe and warm. And Jake felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like he had done something that mattered. Jake woke up the next morning to find Lyra sitting by the small window in his quarters, looking out at the stars. She had not moved from the couch where he had left her the night before. The blanket was folded neatly beside her, and the empty soup bowl sat clean on his small table. Did you sleep? Jake asked, rubbing his eyes. Lyra turned to look at him. In the daylight from the artificial sun lamps that lit the station, Jake could see that her crystal skin was still dim, but not as dark as it had been the night before. Zephyrians do not sleep the way humans do, she said. We enter a state of rest, but we remain aware of our surroundings. It is a survival trait from our home world. Jake nodded and went to his small kitchen to make breakfast. He had never cooked for an alien before, and was not sure what Zephyrians ate. Are you hungry? He asked. Yes, Lyra said quietly, but I do not wish to take your food. You have already done too much for me. Nonsense, Jake said, pulling out ingredients for scrambled eggs. You are my guest. Guests eat. As Jake cooked, Lyra told him more about herself. Her full name was Lyra Veltar, and she had been studying to become a diplomat before her exile. She spoke 17 different languages and had specialized in interspecies relations. Her family was important among the Zephyrians, which made her exile even more shameful to them. What exactly did you do? Jake asked, setting a plate of eggs in front of her. Lyra looked at the food with curiosity before taking a small bite. Her eyes widened with surprise. This is good, she said. Then her expression grew sad again. I defended a group of human children who had wandered into one of our cultural sites. They were just curious. They meant no harm. But my people wanted to punish them severely for the disrespect. I argued that children should not be held to the same standards as adults, and that their curiosity was natural, not malicious. Jake listened as he ate his own breakfast. That does not sound like something worth exiling someone over. It was not just that incident, Lyra continued. I had been questioning our ways for some time. I wrote papers about how our caste system was cruel and outdated. I spoke against our treatment of what we call lesser races. My family tried to silence me, but I would not stop. Finally, they declared me tainted by alien ideas and cast me out. Now no Zephyrian is allowed to help me, speak to me, or even acknowledge that I exist. Jake finished his eggs and looked at this young alien who had lost everything for standing up for what she believed was right. How old are you? He asked. By your counting, I am 23 years old, Lyra said. But I am considered barely an adult by Zephyrian standards. That is part of why my family was so angry. They said I was too young to understand the wisdom of our ways. 23, Jake repeated. You are the same age my daughter would have been. Lyra looked at him with interest. You have a daughter? Jake was quiet for a moment. Had, he said. Finally, she died in an accident when she was 16. That was a long time ago. I am sorry, Lyra said, and Jake could hear real sympathy in her voice. It is okay, Jake said, though it still hurt to talk about it. But maybe that is why I could not leave you in that maintenance corridor. Everyone deserves someone who will stand up for them. Over the next few days, Jake and Lyra settled into a routine. Jake would go to work during the night shift, and Lyra would stay hidden in his quarters. During the day, when Jake slept, Lyra would read books from his small collection and practice speaking Standard Galactic. She was already good at it, but she wanted to speak it perfectly. Jake learned that Lyra was incredibly smart. She could remember everything she read and could solve complex problems that made Jake's head hurt just thinking about them. But she was also naive about many things. She had lived a sheltered life among the Zephyrian elite and had never experienced poverty or hardship until now. Jake taught her simple things that she had never learned. How to cook basic meals, how to do laundry, how to play card games to pass the time. Lyra was fascinated by these ordinary human activities. She said that Zephyrians had servants to do such work, and that learning these skills herself felt liberating. On my world, Lyra explained one afternoon as Jake taught her to play poker, your status determines everything about your life. What you eat, where you live, who you can marry, even how you are allowed to think. I was born into the highest caste, but I always felt trapped by it. Jake dealt another hand of cards. That sounds lonely, he said. It was, Lyra agreed. I had everything that was supposed to make me happy, but I felt empty inside. When I started studying other cultures, I realized there were different ways to live, better ways. As the days passed, Jake noticed that Lyra's skin was getting brighter. The dim flicker was becoming a steady, soft glow. Her appetite was improving too, and she was gaining back some of the weight she had lost during her 3 days of hiding in the maintenance areas. But Jake also knew they could not hide forever. During his work shifts, he heard security officers talking about searching for an unauthorized alien in the station. The Zephyrian embassy was pressuring Station Command to find Lyra and remove her from the station. One night, Jake's supervisor, Carl Stevens, cornered him in a supply closet. Carl was a big man with gray hair and tired eyes who had worked on space stations even longer than Jake. Jake, Carl said, closing the door behind him, I know you're up to something. Jake's heart started beating faster. I do not know what. You mean? I have been watching you, Carl said. You are taking extra food from the cafeteria. You are using more water in your quarters than one person needs. And yesterday, I saw you sneaking through the maintenance corridors during your lunch break. Jake did not know what to say. If Carl reported him, it would be over for both him and Lyra. But then Carl surprised him. Instead of threatening to turn him in, Carl reached into his pocket and pulled out several food packets. Here, he said, handing them to Jake. These fell off a supply truck. Officially, they do not exist. Jake stared at the food packets. Carl. I do not know what you are doing, Jake, Carl said. And I do not want to know. But I have worked with you for 5 years, and you are a good man. Good men sometimes have to do things that are not strictly by the rules. That night, Jake brought the extra food home to Lyra. When he told her what Carl had done, she was amazed. He helped you without even knowing who I am, or why you need the food, she asked. That is how humans are, Jake said. We look out for each other. Not all humans, Lyra pointed out. I have seen the news feeds. Humans fight wars and hurt each other just like other species. Jake nodded. You are right. We are not perfect. We make mistakes and we hurt each other sometimes. But most of us try to do better. Most of us believe that everyone deserves a chance at a good life, no matter where they come from. Lyra was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I used to think my people were superior to all others. We live longer. We are stronger and smarter. Our technology is more advanced. But you humans have something we do not have. What is that? Jake asked. Kindness, Lyra said simply. Not just to your own. Kind, but to strangers. To people who are different from you. To people who cannot do anything for you in return. Jake looked at this young alien who had lost everything and was slowly learning what it meant to be cared for without conditions. Maybe that is what makes us human, he said. Over the following week, Jake noticed other small signs that word was spreading among the human crew. Someone left clean clothes in his size outside his door. The maintenance chief started scheduling repairs in areas where Lyra might need to hide, giving Jake advance warning. The medical officer began leaving vitamin supplements in the human cafeteria with a note saying they were free for anyone who needed them. None of them ever said anything directly to Jake about what he was doing. But somehow, without planning or organization, a quiet network of support was forming around him and Lyra. It was the human way of doing things, Jake realized. When one of their own was trying to do something right, they found ways to help without making a big show of it. But Jake also knew that time was running out. Every day, the search for Lyra intensified. Eventually, they would be found. And when that happened, Jake was not sure what would become of either of them. 3 weeks after Jake had found Lyra in the maintenance corridor, everything changed. Jake came home from his night shift to find Lyra sitting at his small table with an old data pad she had borrowed from his collection. But instead of reading, she was crying. Her tears looked like drops of liquid starlight against her crystal skin. What is wrong? Jake asked, setting down his work bag and hurrying to her side. Lyra looked up at him with her silver eyes full of pain. I have been reading about your history, she said, gesturing to the data pad. About your wars and your struggles. And I learned something that makes me understand why you helped me. Jake sat down across from her. What did you learn? Your people fought terrible wars because of differences in skin color and beliefs, Lyra said. You enslaved each other. You committed genocide. You did horrible things. But you also learned to change. You fought against those who oppressed others. You died to free people who did not even look like you. Jake nodded slowly. Human history was full of darkness, but it was also full of people who had chosen to do better. My people never learned that lesson, Lyra continued. We became powerful and decided that meant we were better than everyone else. We never had to change because no one could force us to. And now I am paying the price for speaking against that. What brought this on? Jake asked gently. Lyra wiped her tears and showed him what she had been reading on the datapad. It was a news report from the Zephyrian Embassy. They have issued a formal demand to Station Command. They want me found and removed within 48 hours, or they will withdraw from all trade agreements with human space. Jake felt his stomach drop. He knew this day would come, but seeing it unofficial. Language made it real. What does that mean exactly? It means millions of humans could lose their jobs, Lyra said. It means trade routes will be disrupted and people will suffer. All because I was foolish enough to speak against my own people. And you are kind enough to help me. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin felt warm and smooth, like polished stone. You were not foolish for standing up for what was right, and I was not foolish for helping you. But people will suffer because of us, Lyra said. People suffer when good people do nothing too, Jake replied. Sometimes you have to choose which kind of suffering you can live with. That evening, as Jake prepared for another night shift, there was a knock at his door. Jake and Lyra both froze. No one ever visited Jake at his quarters. Hide in the bedroom, Jake whispered to Lyra. She quickly gathered her things and disappeared. Into the back room, Jake opened the door to find Commander Helen Brooks standing in the hallway. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. Jake had seen her around the station, but had never spoken to her directly. "Mr. Morrison," she said. "May I come in?" Jake's mouth felt dry, but he stepped aside to let her enter. Commander Brooks looked around his small quarters, taking in every detail. "Nice place," she said. "Simple but comfortable. I imagine it gets lonely, though, living by yourself." "I like the quiet," Jake said carefully. Commander Brooks nodded and walked to the window that looked out onto the docking bays. "I have a problem, Mr. Morrison. The Zephyrian Embassy is demanding we find one of their citizens, who they claim is hiding somewhere on this station. They say this individual is dangerous and unstable." Jake said nothing, but his heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "The thing is," Commander Brooks continued, "I have been in command of this station for 12 years. I know my crew pretty well, and lately I have been noticing some interesting behavior patterns." She turned to face Jake directly. "Food supplies are being redistributed in small amounts that do not show up on official reports. Water usage in certain quarters is higher than normal. Maintenance schedules are being adjusted to give advance warning of inspections in specific areas. Either we have a very organized group of thieves, or my crew is protecting someone." Jake looked into her eyes and saw that she already knew the truth. "Commander, She held up a hand to stop him. "I am not here to arrest you, Mr. Morrison. I am here to offer you a deal." Jake waited for her to continue. "The Zephyrians want their citizen back," Commander Brooks said. "They are offering significant rewards for information leading to her capture. They are also threatening severe consequences if we do not comply with their demands." She paused and looked around the room again. "But I have been doing some research of my own. I looked into the background of this missing person. Lyravel Tar, age 23, former diplomatic student, exiled for political dissent. Does that sound about right?" Jake realized there was no point in lying anymore. "Yes," he said quietly. "I also looked into your background, Mr. Morrison. Father of one daughter, deceased. Honorable discharge from civilian service. 8 years. Of exemplary work performance with no disciplinary actions. References describe you as quiet, reliable, and kind." Commander Brooks sat down on Jake's couch. "So here is my dilemma. I have an empire threatening my station, and my crew over one. young woman who spoke out against injustice. And I have a janitor who risked everything to help her because it was the right thing to do. She looked directly at Jake. If you were in my position, what would you do? Jake thought for a long moment. I would try to find a way to do what was right instead of what was easy. Commander Brooks smiled for the first time since entering his quarters. That is exactly what I thought you would say. She stood up and walked toward the door. Mr. Morrison, I am going to give you some advice. Station security will be conducting a thorough search of all residential areas starting tomorrow morning. If I were hiding someone, I would make sure they were somewhere very safe during that time. Jake stared at her. You are not going to arrest me? For what? Commander Brooks asked. I came here looking for evidence of unauthorized activity and found a man living alone in regulation quarters. I saw nothing suspicious. After she left, Lyra emerged from the bedroom with tears in her eyes again. But this time they were tears of amazement, not sadness. She knows I am here, Lyra said, but she is not going to turn me in. She is giving us a chance, Jake said, but we need to figure out what to do next. The next morning, Carl Stevens appeared at Jake's door with a maintenance uniform and a work cart. Time to get to work, he said with a wink. For the next 2 days, as security teams searched every residential quarter on the station, Lyra hid in maintenance areas that Carl and his team had temporarily declared off-limits for repairs. Jake continued his normal work routine, but he could feel the tension building throughout the station. On the second night, Jake was cleaning near the main docking bay when he overheard a conversation between 2 Zephyrian guards. They were speaking in their own language, but Jake had picked up enough words over the years to understand some of what they were saying. They were frustrated. They had been sure the exile was being hidden by someone, but the search had turned up nothing. The ambassador was angry and was threatening to escalate the situation to their home. Jake finished his cleaning and headed home. But when he arrived at his quarters, he found Lyra packing the few belongings she had accumulated during her stay. What are you doing? Jake asked. I am leaving, Lyra said without looking at him. I cannot let this continue. Too many people are risking too much for me. Where will you go? Jake asked. Lyra finally met his eyes. I do not know. Maybe I can find passage on a cargo ship to somewhere far away. Maybe I can disappear into one of the outer colonies where no one will look for me. Jake sat down beside her on the couch. Is that what you want? To spend the rest of your life running and hiding? I want to stop being a burden to good people, Lyra said. You have already done more for me than anyone has a right to ask. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You know, my daughter used to say something when she was little. She would say that the best way to thank someone for helping you is not to waste the help they gave you. Lyra looked at him with confusion. What do you mean? I mean that if you run away now, then everything we have all risked for you will have been for nothing, Jake said. But if you stay and fight for what you believe in, then maybe something good can come from all of this. Fight how? Lyra asked. I am one person against an entire empire. Jake smiled. You are not alone anymore. You have something your people never gave you. What is that? Friends, Jake said simply. And friends do not let friends face the impossible alone. Outside, the station continued its slow rotation, carrying millions of beings from dozens of worlds to the darkness of space. But inside Jake's small quarters, 2 very different people sat together and planned how to change the galaxy, one act of courage at a time. Jake never made it to work that night. As he and Lyra discussed their options, security officers appeared at his door with orders to search his quarters immediately. Someone had reported suspicious activity in the human residential section, and Jake's name was on the list of people to be questioned. Jake barely had time to whisper, Stay calm, to Lyra before the officers pushed past him into his small home. Lyra sat perfectly still on the couch, her crystal skin glowing with a steady, calm light that made her look like any other Zephyrian who might be visiting the station legally. Identification, the lead security officer demanded, pointing his scanner at Lyra. Lyra reached into her pocket and pulled out a data chip that Jake had never seen before. The officer scanned it, frowned, and scanned it again. "This says you are Lyra Velmer, cultural attach from the Zephyrian trade delegation," the officer said. "But we are looking for Lyra Veltar, an exile." "I understand the confusion," Lyra said in perfect, formal Standard Galactic. "Veltar was my birth name. Velmer is my professional name, chosen when I entered diplomatic service. Many Zephyrians change their names to reflect their adult roles." Jake stared at her in amazement. In the weeks they had been together, Lyra had never mentioned having false identification or diplomatic training that would let her lie so convincingly. The security officer looked suspicious, but scanned the ID again. "What are you doing in human quarters instead of the Zephyrian embassy section?" "I am conducting a cultural study on human living conditions," Lyra replied smoothly. "Mr. Morrison has been kind enough to allow me to observe daily human life from close proximity. It is part of a report I am preparing for my superiors about interspecies cooperation." The officer turned to Jake. "Is this true?" Jake's mouth felt dry, but he nodded. "She has been staying here for research purposes. Everything is documented, with station services." This was a lie, but Jake said it with such conviction that the officer actually checked his portable computer to look for the non-existent documentation. After 20 minutes of questions and searches, the security team finally left. Jake waited until he was sure they were gone before turning to Lyra with wide eyes. "Where did you get that identification?" he asked. Lyra held up the data chip. "I made it. During my diplomatic training, we learned how to create emergency identities in case we were ever trapped in hostile territory. I had hoped I would never need to use those skills. And the story about cultural research, also part of our training," Lyra said. "The best lies are mostly truth. I am studying human culture, just not in the way I told them." Jake sat down heavily in his chair. "That was too close. They will be back." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "And next time they might bring Zephyrian officers who can tell the difference between a real cultural attach and an exile with false papers." Over the next few days, the situation on the station grew more tense. The Zephyrian ambassador delivered another ultimatum, this time threatening to block all human ships from Zephyrian space if the exile was not found and surrendered. News feeds throughout human space began reporting on the crisis, and some politicians were calling for Jake's government to find and hand over the fugitive to preserve the peace. But something unexpected was also happening. The story of a human janitor protecting an alien refugee had spread through the station's human community and beyond. Messages of support began arriving from Earth and the outer colonies. Human workers on other stations sent statements saying they stood with Jake. And Lyra Carl Stevens appeared at Jake's door one morning with a group of other human crew members. There was Linda Park, the medical officer who had been quietly providing nutritional supplements. There was Bob Martinez, the docking chief who had been adjusting schedules to help hide Lyra. There was Mary Chun, the communications officer who had been monitoring Zephyrian transmissions to give advance warning of searches. "We need to talk," Carl said. They gathered in Jake's small living room, making the space feel crowded but warm. Carl spoke first. "The word is out," he said. "Everyone knows what you have been doing, Jake, and we want you to know that you are not alone in this. We have been watching how this young lady has been treated by her own people," Linda Park added, looking at Lyra with kind eyes. "And we have been watching how our government is talking about handing her over to keep the peace. It is not right. Bob Martinez nodded. My grandfather came to Earth as a refugee from the resource wars. He always told me that the measure of a civilization is how it treats people who have nowhere else to go. Mary Chun pulled out a data pad and showed it to Jake and Lyra. I have been monitoring communications throughout human space. There are protests happening on 12 worlds demanding that we protect Lyra. Human workers are threatening to strike, rather than cooperate with Zephyrian ships. This is becoming bigger than just our station. Jake looked around at these people who had risked their careers to support him and Lyra. I never asked any of you to do this, he said. You did not have to ask, Carl replied. You showed us what the right thing looks like. Sometimes that is all it takes. Lyra had been listening quietly, but now she spoke. I do not understand. Why are so many humans willing to risk conflict with a powerful empire for one person they do not even know? Linda Park smiled. Because that is who we are. Humans have a saying. We are only as strong as the weakest among us. When someone is cast out and abandoned, it diminishes all of us. But I am not human, Lyra pointed out. Neither were the refugees my grandfather helped during the war, Bob Martinez said. Neither were the slaves our ancestors freed. Neither were the oppressed people our great-grandparents died to protect. Being human is not about what species you belong to. It is about recognizing the humanity in others. Mary Chun leaned forward. Lyra, what you did on your home world, speaking out against injustice, even when it cost you everything, that was human. What Jake did, taking you in when you had nowhere to go, that was human. What we are all doing now, standing together against powerful people who want to hurt someone weaker, that is human. That afternoon, Jake was called to Commander Brooks' office. He had never been to the command section of the station before, and the corridors there were wider and cleaner than the areas where he normally worked. Important aliens in expensive clothes walked past him without seeming to notice he existed. Commander Brooks was waiting for him behind a desk covered with data pads and communication devices. She looked tired, as if she had not slept much recently. Sit down, Jake, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. We need to discuss your situation. Jake sat down and waited for her to continue. I have been in contact with Earth Command about your case, she said. There are people in government who want me to find Lyra and turn her over to the Zephyrians immediately. They say the economic consequences of this crisis are too severe to ignore. Jake felt his heart sink. I understand. But there are also people in government who say that humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy depends on how we handle this situation. Commander Brooks. The next morning, Lyra walked into the main administrative center of New Geneva Station, wearing clean clothes that Linda Park had brought her and carrying herself with the dignity of someone who had nothing left to lose. Jake walked beside her, still wearing his janitor's uniform, because he said it reminded everyone who he really was. Word had spread throughout the station that something important was about to happen. The main corridors were lined with humans, but also with representatives from other alien species who had been quietly watching the situation develop. Jake recognized some of them from his cleaning rounds, but now they looked at him with respect instead of indifference. Commander Brooks was waiting for them at the entrance to the diplomatic section, along with Ambassador Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. The ambassador was tall and imposing, with crystal skin that glowed much brighter than Lyra's in robes that marked him as one of the highest-ranking Zephyrians in known space. So, Ambassador Vextar said, looking at Lyra with disgust, the exile finally shows herself. I was beginning to think you had died in the maintenance tunnels, like the worthless creature you have become. Lyra met his gaze without flinching. I am very much alive, Ambassador, and I am here to speak. You have nothing to say that anyone wants to hear, the ambassador replied. You are a criminal, and a traitor to your own people. You will be returned to Zephyrian space to face judgment for your crimes." "What crimes?" Commander Brooks asked. "I have reviewed the charges against Miss Veltar, and they seem to consist entirely of expressing opinions that her government disagreed with." Ambassador Vextar turned his cold gaze to the commander. She questioned the natural order of things. She suggested that lesser species deserved the same consideration as Zephyrians. She corrupted young minds with dangerous ideas about equality and compassion. These are serious offenses against Zephyrian law and culture. "And what law says that thinking different thoughts is a crime?" Jake asked quietly. The ambassador looked at Jake as if he was seeing him for the first time. "You are the janitor who has been harboring this criminal. You will face charges as well for interfering in Zephyrian justice." "I am Jake Morrison," Jake said, stepping forward slightly. "I am a janitor, and I am proud of that work. I clean up messes that other people leave behind. I make places safer and cleaner for everyone who uses them. And when I found a young person who had been thrown away like garbage, I did what my job trained me to do. I cleaned up the mess that someone else had made." A murmur went through the crowd that had gathered to watch. Jake had never been much of a public speaker, but his simple words carried more weight than any fancy diplomatic language. Lyra stepped forward to stand beside Jake. "Ambassador Vextar, I want everyone here to understand exactly what my crime was. I defended human children who had accidentally entered one of our cultural sites. I argued that children should not be punished severely for innocent curiosity. I wrote papers suggesting that our caste system caused unnecessary suffering and that we could learn valuable things from other species." She paused and looked around at the crowd of different aliens who had gathered to listen. "But my greatest crime was this. I learned to see other beings as people instead of as tools or obstacles, or inferior creatures to be used and discarded." Ambassador Vextar's skin flared brighter with anger. "You speak of learning, but you learned nothing but corruption and weakness. This human has filled your mind with soft, foolish ideas that make you unfit to be Zephyrian." "No," Lyra said firmly. "Jake Morrison taught me what it means to be strong. Strength is not about having power over others. Strength is about using whatever power you have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Strength is about choosing to do right even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted." She turned to address the crowd directly. "I have lived among humans for several weeks now. I have seen how they treat strangers, how they care for those who are different from them, how they sacrifice for principles instead of profit. They are not perfect, but they try to be better than they were yesterday. That is something my people stopped doing long ago." The Kandorian trade delegate stepped forward from the crowd. He was a tall, thin alien with blue-green skin and large, kind eyes. "I have been watching this situation with great interest," he said in accented Standard Galactic. "The humans have shown remarkable integrity throughout this crisis. They have risked economic hardship to protect one individual who sought refuge among them. This speaks well of their character as a species." The Terralian cultural attach, a short, furry creature with silver markings, also spoke up. "My people have old stories about the duty to protect strangers who seek shelter. We had thought such values were extinct in the modern galaxy. It is encouraging to see them alive among the humans." Ambassador Vextar looked around at the growing support for Lyra and Jake with obvious displeasure. "This is irrelevant sentiment. The exile belongs to Zephyrian justice, and any who interfere will face the consequences." But then something unexpected happened. More alien representatives began stepping forward to speak. The Hegemony Trade Council representative mentioned how impressed his people were with human principles. The Stellar Confederation observer talked about how this incident had sparked discussions in their government about refugee policies. Jake realized that what had started as one janitor helping one frightened young alien had somehow grown into something much larger. Species throughout the galaxy were talking about justice and compassion and the treatment of those who speak out against oppression. Commander Brooks stepped into the center of the growing crowd. Ambassador Vexstar, I have received word from Earth Command regarding this situation. The human government has officially granted Miss Veltar political asylum. She is now under the protection of human space and cannot be removed without her consent. The ambassador's skin flared even brighter. This is an act of war against the Zephyrian Empire. No, Commander Brooks replied calmly. This is an act of conscience by people who believe that seeking justice should not be a crime punishable by exile and death. Ambassador Vexstar looked around at the crowd of aliens and humans who were all staring at him expectantly. Jake could see that the ambassador was realizing his position was not as strong as he had thought. Public opinion throughout the galaxy was shifting, and other species were beginning to question their own relationships with the Zephyrian Empire. This is not over, the ambassador said finally. The Zephyrian Empire will not forget this insult, and we will not forget what we learned here today, the Kandorian delegate replied. That courage and compassion are not weaknesses, but the foundation of true civilization. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake found himself standing with Lyra in the corridor where it had all begun. She was no longer the frightened, broken young alien he had found hiding in a maintenance alcove. Her crystal skin glowed with steady, confident light, and her silver eyes held hope for the future. What happens now? Jake asked. Now I begin the real work, Lyra said. I will write about what I learned among humans. I will speak to other Zephyrians who have questions about our ways. I will try to build bridges between species who have been taught to see each other as enemies. That sounds like a big job for one person, Jake said. Lyra smiled. I am not one person anymore. I have friends. And friends help each other change the galaxy, one act of kindness at a time. 6 months later, Jake was still working as a janitor on New Geneva Station, but his job had grown to include something new. He had become an unofficial human cultural liaison, helping other species understand how humans approached problems of justice and cooperation. It was still mostly cleaning up messes that other people made, but now the messes were misunderstandings and conflicts instead of just spilled food in garbage. Lyra had been granted a position with the Galactic Council as a specialist in interspecies relations and refugee advocacy. She traveled throughout known space, speaking to governments and organizations about compassion and justice. But she always returned to New Geneva Station, and when she did, she always visited Jake. On this particular evening, they sat in Jake's quarters, sharing a simple meal and playing cards, just as they had during those first difficult weeks. Through the window, they could see ships from dozens of species docking at the station, a testament to how far things had come. I got a message today, Lyra said, as she dealt another hand of poker. 3 more Zephyrian worlds have voted to reform their exile laws. They are calling it the Morrison Doctrine. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. They named it after me? You started something, Jake Morrison, Lyra said with a smile. One act of kindness toward a stranger, and now beings throughout the galaxy are reconsidering how they treat those who are different from them. Jake looked at his cards and then at Lyra. I still do not understand why everyone thinks I did something so special. I just did what anyone would do. No, Lyra said gently. You did what anyone should do, but most people do not. Most people see someone in trouble and look the other way because helping is complicated and risky and uncomfortable. You saw someone in trouble, and your first thought was how to help, not how to avoid getting involved. She reached across the table and took his hand. That is what makes you.